Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Jan Erickson from Stepping Aside, and welcome to Somewhat Daily Tarot and Rune for the 27th day of November, 2018. Let's see, we have a 9-day today, so we have some completion, which is very nice. I like the 9 days in this month and year of illumination. Let's see, so this is a Tuesday. I believe that is Mars energy, if I'm not mistaken. Let me get the grimoire out to be sure. Well, actually, that's over there, so we'll leave that alone. The Tuesday is, I believe, Mars energy. So the color red. So passions might be high today if you don't keep it in balance. But you can use it, you know. You can use Mars energy to get things done, and, you know, especially if maybe projects have been lagging and you don't really have the you don't really have the impulse to finish it, you know. So sometimes you can use Mars energy to your advantage. Sometimes it runs amok. That's not good. Saw a little bit of that this weekend, didn't we? Sometimes it affects our ability to stay in control. You know, impulse control seems to be a big one with people with too much Mars energy. So might think about staying in balance, keeping that in balance today. Well, let's shuffle just a little bit more, and then we'll count 13 and see what we have for today. Oh, well, we got the High Priestess. That is card number 2 of the Major Arcana. It's the one I lost in my other deck. I can't find. I have no idea where it is. I'm sure it's somewhere here, you know, but I have no idea. But that's the one that I misplaced. You can see Solomon's the pillars from Solomon's temple are in the front. You see a crescent moon down below. You have the black and the white, which is polarity, darkness and light. See, I don't have my, let's see if I can use a candle. Oh, yeah. She holds the scroll. It's the Torah, actually, on her lap. So the holy word. You see the triplicity above her head, but you also see, you almost see the tree of life in her. If you look really carefully, you're going to see some round circles, circular objects, and if you look, it looks very much, if you can just see beyond into the background of this, you're going to see the Kabbalistic tree of life. You can see it. You got up here and here. This would be one. Probably the Torah would be another. You see some down here, and I bet you're going to see one down there at her feet. So some of it's implied, isn't it? The High Priestess is an interesting card. Counterpart to the Magus, really, or Magus, however you want to pronounce it, or Magician. It's the Magus or Magus in Crowley's Thoth Tarot. But the High Priestess is about the feminine divine and about secret knowledge and inspiration and intuition, depth, compassion, revelation. It's basically about aligning in our source presence and using that inner voice, that inner wisdom to inform us. Between that and the Magician card, the High Priestess and the Magician card, you're looking at the alchemical process more so with the magician than you are with the high priestess, but the high priestess takes that alchemical interaction talked about in the magician card and embodies that in her, brings that sense of inner wisdom into her center, and then guides from that standpoint. So she's really the one, I think, at least in my opinion, that begins this process of integration within. The fool begins the journey with undeveloped potential. The magician then brings that alchemical process into being. But I think it's the high priestess that actually integrates all of that for us. And so that's really a really interesting card. It's a card of, it's the two. So we're looking at polarity and balance and duality, expressions of that. And you, of course, can see that, with both pillars here, showing the blending of dark and light, of the shadow side of self with spirit. At least that's how I interpret this one. But I feel compelled to draw another card. Let's do that. Let's draw one more card. Being a major arcana card, that's a soul archetype card. So, you see something like this, and it's although the small cards and from the minor arcana and the court cards, they certainly do inform, give maybe a little more specifics about what's going on and what the influences are in the day. But your major cards, those are the ones that are going to really tell you the journey that you're on and the things that you need to be, resolving and thinking about and coming to terms with along the way. And so integrated polarity with the high priestess, going from that center point, from the stillness within, from the source presence within. What she's basically telling us, because she's sitting there, she's not really doing anything other than sitting and just being in her own sovereignty, in her own presence. And that's basically what she's, in other words, it's kind of an expression of allowing, isn't it? And I like that. So let's do another card. Well, we had this one the other day, yesterday, the 8, was it yesterday? Yeah, the 8 of Cups. Again, moving away from emotions that no longer serve us. And with the high priestess coming to that inner voice, that inner stillness, and letting that inform you, and letting that inform the process. And together we have, 8 and 2 is 10, so that's 1, that's new beginnings. So that kind of, it's kind of a theme. I did a reading last night that I published on the blog, and I used the Wildwood Tarot to do that one, and that one was all about new beginnings and balance and decisions and deception and all of that. So if you want to go over there to imsteppingaside.com and check that out. That turned out to be kind of an interesting reading. But we let our emotions get away from us, don't we? And the best thing to do when that happens is to bring everything to a still point and just let all of it go. Whatever energetic connections that you've created, because we create them. We're either responding to something that someone is sending our way, or we're creating that whole intention by giving attention to things. And it creates channels, energetic channels between yourself and whoever else or the situation or what have you. And depending upon the type of channel you create, it can be difficult to extricate yourself from it, particularly if you're empathic. That we just tend to soak that stuff up like a sponge. And if we don't learn to observe instead of absorb, then we can be, really affected by it. And, people can end up thinking that we're just really emotional people. Well, yeah, on one level we are, but a lot of the time we're experiencing someone else's emotions. And so it's hard to, if you're not accustomed to identifying which is yours and which is someone else's, it can be confusing. So, but there's so much out there now about, I talk about being an empath. I wrote a couple of books about it. So actually, well, yeah, I wrote Empath, and then When Vampires Attack is the most recent book I published. And that's about vampiric energy and how we deal with that. So, had someone ask me, so you believe in vampires? It's like, well, do I think there's historical reference to what vampires were? Yes, I do. But no, I'm talking about energetic vampires. So anyway, let's take a look at the rune. If I can ever get one to just finally end up in my hand here. What I do in my process with my runes is I just allow them to fall in the, I have my hand in the pouch and I'm letting the runes fall through. Vunyo, which I believe is the 8th rune. I'm going to look, I'm going to cheat and look here. Yep. Bunyo is the 8th rune of the Elder Futhark. So we're looking at joy, the wish rune, happily ever after, harmony with others. Here we're looking, though, I think, at harmony within, if we're looking at the High Priestess. But of course, that affects everything else, you know, how we express that harmony to other people. But that's interesting because I think what we're really talking about, when you get that alignment within, it makes it a whole lot easier to then extend that to others. I want to look, though, real quick and see if there's anything I've missed. I like Vunyo. Yeah, fellowship, empathy. You know, that seems to be at a minimum these days, empathy with some folks. But basically what we're talking about with Vunyo is relationships. With the High Priestess, though, that's a real inner journey, I think. And so I think that it's about what gives us happiness. And so if we're extending ourselves out and we're doing it chaotically, you know, if you're someone who's given to extending intrusive energy to others, that's not good. But where it all begins is within. And so if we're not aligned within, if we're chaotic within, then it makes it difficult to come to unity with other people. It's difficult to cooperate with them. It's difficult to see anything positive about them. We tend to want to get together with people that are like-minded, right? The hardest part is when they're not. So those people that maybe have families that didn't vote the same way they do, maybe the holidays are not quite as easy to be around one another. There seems to be a lot of volatility, you know, about people's choice here. And so no matter what side you sit on, the other side is wrong. And so there's no middle ground anymore. And so we can look at this from an inner standpoint with the High Priestess of aligning within and then using that focus then to extend to others, you know, whatever interaction you want to have with them in a balanced fashion. But it can also be a more collective experience, as we know. Right now, we're having a hard time finding harmony. We're having a hard time even agreeing on what's abusive and what isn't. So I think that I think it would do everybody well to observe the High Priestess, the message of the High Priestess, and go within and really think about, what does harmony mean? You know, what does it mean inside? I mean, we know what it means there when things are not harmonious inside, when we're emotional, when we can't really see what's going on and we're frustrated and we're just experiencing all of that chaotic emotion. We know how that feels, but we're also seeing it expressed out in the world. And I think that maybe that's the message for today, to walk away from emotions that don't serve us, that don't result in harmony, you know, that want to throw a rock in everything, you know, and destroy everything and disturb things to the point that nobody knows for sure who to trust, what to think, what to do, how to feel about anything. And I think that that's where we are right now. And I think that how we heal that, though, is to heal the heart within and to get that balance right within. To understand that the enemy we see is not the enemy, that it's just an expression of the other side of self. We have to move beyond the notion of the other, because there's nothing about any of us that truly is the other. It really just is the other side of self that we see. So maybe what we're seeing is something that's challenging. You know, what we see that we find difficult to experience with someone else, perhaps it's something that's challenging something within us. Either it's something that we also do, and express in the world, and maybe we're not aware of it. Maybe we're not aware of the effect that that has, and so we're experiencing that for ourselves. But it may not have anything to do with anything that we're doing ourselves. It could just simply be that we're looking at something and we're trying to make sense of it. If everything comes from source, if the creator is all that is, if you go from that premise, then everything is the creator manifested into form. So then everything we're watching is the creator playing out this drama of being in tangible bodies and being in this universe. And that's all that's happening here. But we decide, we judge it as either good or bad, or we don't like it, or we do like it, or whatever. It's an either or judgment that we make. It's rare that we're neutral. It would be the best if we would just be neutral and just observe, but we don't do that. So all sorts of emotions are stirred up, and we get very, very fixated in what we don't like. And then somehow that turns into demonizing a little toddler at the border, thinking it's okay to gas her. Because after all, her mother was irresponsible to bring her here. There has to be a better description of that, isn't there? Can't there be one that recognizes that this woman traveled all this way with her children to try to seek a better life, one that's away from violence and away from poverty, that allows them to live in safety and peace? Now, maybe that's not in this country. Clearly, if I were someone like that and came upon this, maybe I would be so desperate that I would just want in anyway, because it sure seems to be that that's what's going on here. But maybe we can drop the enemy idea for a few minutes and just imagine ourselves in their position. What if we were having to flee that sort of life? What if we were so terrified for the safety and security and happiness and growth of our children that we were willing to trek 1,000 miles to a country that is saying they don't want us? And then we get there and we try to come in because it actually is legal to do so. You know, I know that there's a faction of us that believes that coming to a border and even crossing over and getting captured, you say, I want asylum. It's the process we've given people. Fleeing, uncertainty and violence and war, and, to want to claim a refugee status or an asylum status because of the terror that you experience in your own personal life. Now, I realize that can tug at the heartstrings, and you have to be careful, and you have to have a policy, and because there's, resources are finite ultimately. But surely we can agree that what happened this weekend shouldn't happen anymore. There has to be a different dialogue. There has to be a different choice. We can't have an administration who lies and says, oh, all the other ones did it. No, that's not actually true. They take it, it's like, I call it pulling a thread. I mean, have you ever known someone that you can be talking to them, trying to make a point, and you use an example, but they take a little piece of that example and they run with it. And now suddenly that's all anyone's talking about is that little piece of the example. That's what I call pulling a thread. I feel like this administration pulls threads from the last administration. And because one time something happened, well, suddenly that's the whole policy. Well, no, it wasn't. And so consequently, now we're putting kids in cages and things like that. Well, what that is reflective of is a lack of internal balance. It's the willingness to see things in a way that creates enemies where there aren't any, that takes a difficult situation and turns it into chaos, that always wants to blame everybody else instead of owning whatever decision they make on them for themselves. They want to blame everybody else. And in the meantime, nothing happens. People are harmed. Children are scarred for life. And all I'm suggesting is that maybe some of this is so emotion based, based in this fear of the other, that now we see a government that wants to behave in a way that is harmful to people in a very profoundly fundamental way. But this is about, instead of doing this and letting go of emotions that are not useful, because racism is an emotion that's not useful. All right? It's based on fear of the other and not understanding that the other is just the other side of self. It's no more different from you than anything else. It's like I have 4 fingers and a thumb. I got them over here too. They're not different. They're on the same body. I mean, yeah, this one looks a little different than this one. Okay. But they're still little fingers. They're part of my body. So what, I'm going to reject one of them because one of them doesn't look the same as the other? Look, it really is that simple. We tell ourselves that it's not. And then we get into this whole imbalance that results in things that shouldn't be happening. So, anyway, something to think about. When we live in balance, when we let go of things that no longer serve us, emotions that are simply getting in the way of loving one another, then we forget the joy. We forget to live in joy, or as Bashar says, our highest joy. So I think in this month and year of illumination, if we can't figure that much out at least, then we're not paying attention. So anyhow, check out the blog post I wrote last night. I published last night. It's over at imsteppingaside.com. I'd love you to check that out and maybe you can glean a little more about where I think we need to be going and what the truth of all this is. So anyhow, at least that's what the cards are telling me and what the runes are telling me. So anyhow, today it's raining, so we won't be walking anywhere, but that's kind of unusual on the high desert to get some rain, but it happens this time of year. Sometimes we get it in the summer, usually in the form of ground striking lightning along with it, but right now it's raining, and on the high desert we need it, so yay. Anyhow, hopefully it won't turn to snow too soon, but we're ready for it if it does. So anyhow, have a wonderful day. Be good to yourself and be good to others. Align, get centered, manage your polarity, manage your dark and your light aspects of self. And we'll see you tomorrow. Blessed be.